falls to me to take us to the next stage, and the final stage of tonight, this evening, is to announce Project 40. And I just want to say some sort of preliminary remarks. I lived, when my children were very young, I lived in Southeast Asia, and I had a really quick cultural experience, which was when you had a birthday party, you take a present, don't you? When it's a child's 4, you take a present along. And then I learnt really quickly that in Asia, the family that are hosting the present give a present to every child that comes to the party. Okay? And it's a real kind of, and it takes you a while because all the mums and dads, and we lived in expat communities where there was a lot of money, so everybody was very, very generous. And suddenly Robyn was having a party for a 3-year-old, and I wasn't giving presents to all the children that came, and there might be 30 children that come. So I'm telling these preliminary remarks to say today we're giving a gift to the profession. So Peter, at 40 years, has decided that we would like to give a gift. And we thought we'd give you, well, you've got a gift tonight, a beautiful bookmark. And then we had a discussion about, well, what might that gift be? And there was talk about a book, like an extra publication, so you got another thing in the mail. And we sort of pushed ourselves and pushed the edges of this idea of the gift to the profession. And it's a great pleasure that I announce that gift. What it is, and it's an international, worldwide gift, it's YouTube clips that are openly accessible to the entire intellectual community in the teaching of reading. It's a way of Peter giving back the kind of strength and power that Nigel so nicely showed is in this room and amongst this group of people, back to the entire profession. The young people, the young teachers that are training, and within that gift, we want to encapsulate the kind of history and the pathway and this great intellectual strength that I think Peter holds in this room and in our history. And we're giving 5 of those gifts this year. 5 YouTube clips which will be out there for all of us. One of my personal ideas was to very accessible to teacher educators, because I know that we all sort of struggle with how do we give a nice little encapsulation of the history of this theory. You know, the great pressure in teacher education these days to say that this theory just didn't emerge, it's got a long history. So there will be 5 of those. There's one we're launching tonight, the first one, which I'll comment on in a moment, and then there's 4 more to come, 1 each term next year. Now this is where you'll have to concentrate for a moment. I know you're getting fatigued. There are levels of this gift. There's the gift to the profession that's open access. That's YouTube, international, tell your friends in New York, it's out there. The next level is an essay written by the person who's talking on the YouTube clip. That's also publicly available. Then there'll be this kind of, and Peter's going to talk more about seduction in a moment. There's this sense that there'll be a pathway through into membership. Okay, we're trying to capture this, Mark's alluded to this new generation of young people coming into teaching. They're not necessarily print-based, although you've argued the opposite actually. You've said that perhaps the internet isn't everything for them. We're trying to get them through this gateway into membership. And so tonight's launch is a kind of, I think, significant, and hopefully in 40 years' time they'll talk about tonight, and they'll say that on their 40th anniversary they talked about this digital kind of provision, and it'll all be historical by that stage. There'll be 5. I'll announce the first one, and I'm going to invite Professor Freebody to join me on the dais in a moment. The first one is about reading, the teaching of reading, and you'll see some of that. The next one will be about diversity. It'll talk about Peter's specific construction of diversity. There'll be one on the teaching of writing, one on knowledge about language, and children's literature, because we've sort of distilled that from all of that work that you saw come up earlier. They're probably our 5 key contributions to the profession. So I'm about to generously launch our gift back to you. So you think of the young children, you've all come to the birthday party with a gift, but you're all going to go home with a gift as well. Professor Freebody, may I invite you up to join me here, please?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I've never been given as a gift before, so it's Really interesting experience. Mark and Beverly used these fantastic PowerPoints, but I'll be very brief. I've got one on my bus ticket. I just wanted to say that it's amazing to be in the same room as all these people. I mean, look at the people in this room. And it's a real moment in the history of English teaching in this state and in this country, probably, to have this gathering. And that's very special. And when you looked at the range of materials over the decades, that scroll that we had, I guess you can see why there is such a group of people who've committed themselves to this and themselves given such a rich bounty to this profession over a very long time. And so when I was asked just to discuss the possibilities of things, and having looked at various sorts of pretty web-footed, for the most part, business plans and ideas of structuring things and getting people involved in professional associations, when many professional associations in our areas, associated areas, are actually shrinking pretty dramatically in other countries, and yet Peter is growing, and that speaks to a very special identity in the niche that Peter has occupied and turned it into, a major element in the field itself. So I think that's something to think about, is that there is something about the identity of teaching English in the primary school that is a special thing that's distinctive from the kinds of offerings and supports that other associations can give. So that's I'm very grateful to be involved in discussions with that, and I'm happy to be here. You're going to see a video by me. I'm marginally more interested when I'm heavily pixelated, so I hope that comes off in the spirit in which it's offered. But looking back, 1972, think about 1972. We're talking about preparing kids to live in the future in the decades ahead. And think about what 1972 was. This association was formed before Gough Whitlam was first elected, and before, in that spirit of change and growth and the massive sense of possibility for difference that could be created here. Who could have predicted the next 40 years, the things that would have happened? Who could have predicted the sort of Asian migration that changed the face, enriched our experience in this country over the intervening 40 years? Who could have predicted the continuing debt that we owe Indigenous Australians in education, the educational debt that we have yet to repay, but that we have at last engaged with, I think, emotionally and morally and intellectually. And that's for 1972, from that vantage point, this is a massive step that we should never let hold of and we should never feel complacent about. But it seems to me a very significant thing. Who could have predicted that Keith Richards would still be alive? And who could have predicted, if you could have predicted the internet, and if you could have predicted my school in 1972, then you were smoking something you shouldn't have been smoking. So I think that when we look at the task now, the task is to really imagine and to be mindful of the fact that the next 40 years, if anything, will produce more dramatic, more consequential, and more unpredictable changes. And that it is now that future needs to be built and continually built by yourselves and by this association, without losing hold of the deep values that have got you so far in this 40-year period. Edmund Huey did a review of the research on reading, teaching children reading in the primary school. And that review was published in 1908. And he drew together a whole lot of studies. And two of his conclusions really have stuck with me over the years. One is, he says, and I almost know this off by heart, is we have to teach these basics right, but in many classrooms we see an old curiosity shop where the ABCs are a fetish. That's a quote for you. That sticks. That stays, 100 and something years later. The other quote is that there are many classrooms I see where there is an interest in everything except the social and cultural lives of these children. And he makes a big point about the significance of this, the significance of the fact that teaching literacy, acculturating kids into reading, into understanding books and stories, is at the one moment calling for a lot of intensely practical, intellectual, moral and emotional work in a way that probably no other job does. You can't think of something that combines those areas of expertise and insight moment by moment every day of a teacher's life, like teaching literacy and English in the primary school years. So I think 1908 he was saying that. So the important thing for us is to be looking forward as well as congratulating ourselves on what has gone before, and to realise that we're all droplets in a very long stream, and we have to imagine, never lose sight of what that stream is, and never lose sight of how important it is. So happy birthday. Thank you.